Bilingual Redditors, have you ever heard someone talk about you secretly in another language that didn't think you understood? I'm Hispanic and fluent in both English and Spanish, and people often think I don't speak Spanish. So there was this one time I was at a laundromat folding clothes, while these two Hispanic ladies are at a table across from me folding their clothes. Both of them are speaking loudly in Spanish, so I couldn't help but overhear what they were talking about. They start talking about alcohol. One of them said ever since she got married and had a kid she stopped drinking. The other chick was saying that she loved getting drunk and could not live without alcohol, that she wanted a boyfriend so he could buy her alcohol and take care of her kid. Then they both start talking about their ideal boyfriend. One of them says that she is lucky to have found her husband because he is everything she wanted in a guy. The other chick was listing off a huge checklist of her perfect guy. Hot guy, must worship her, buy her everything, amazing job, clean, cook, take care of kids, etc. She then is interrupted by her friend saying that she was never going to find her perfect guy with her list being so long. She then turns and looks towards me saying, "What about a guy like him?" Her friend immediately rejected that idea. She then began to make fun of my clothes, hair, glasses, everything. I'm a pretty nerdy looking dude. She says how I look like a loser who is doing nothing in life, probably that poor, and won't be able to buy her things, and more. I think to myself that this chick is quite rude and loudly reply in Spanish, "I wouldn't be into a chick like yourself, because I wouldn't want a lazy drunk for a girlfriend." She got silent and just stared at me. Her friend began to laugh uncontrollably. Living in Germany for a few years, I could understand German. Traveling in a band somewhere near Augsburg, little girl around the age of 5 or 6 with her mother sat opposite and pointed at me as asked why I'm so black. Mother patiently explains about Afro-Americans and slavery and freedom. Girl waves me while leaving. I'm Indian. So much yes. I'm a man with very long hair. One evening at Dell HQ, the Spanish only speaking janitors were behind me waiting for the elevator, and one of them says, "She sure has a nice ass and beautiful hair." They turned red when I turned around to show them my long elegant beard. I said, "Gracious," in a cute girly voice. I worked as an English teacher in a Japanese high school. I wanted my students to use only English in class, so I never let them know I understood and spoke Japanese. For a year I overheard them talk about how long they thought my dick was, whether I had a Japanese girlfriend, and so on. At the end of the school year, with all the students gathered in the gym, the principal asked me to make a farewell speech, as I was returning to my home country. So I stepped up to the mic and delivered my speech in fluent Japanese. Ever see 800 jaws drop at the same time? It was glorious. I spent a few years in Seattle and gained near fluency after about a year of immersion. Most days on the street I'd hear something about the size of my nose or my blue eyes. Usually it was satisfying enough to look right at the speaker until they paused, then I'd just introduce myself and ask them about their day. Met a lot of cool people. In some situations it was a game. One of my Korean friends was fluent in English. We used to take the bus together and talk about whatever, just to see what happened with the crowd. He spoke English and I replied in Korean. Really messed with the other passengers' heads. Good times. I was at Disney World on a school trip and there was a German father and son standing in front of us in line. They were looking around and muttering all kinds of insults. The usual fat stupid American bullshit. Now, having been an exchange student in Germany for a year, I perfectly understood everything they said. So I turned to my friend and started not so subtly insulting them, making sure they could hear me. The father turned around and said to me, "You may not understand us, but we understand you." I looked him right in the eye and said with a big smile on face, "Mac Hensi Bitkin Aufstand, Jap. Let's not make a scene, okay? Close bracket." My uncle was on the other side of this. My family is Dutch, and when my aunt and uncle were living in London, she taught him the phrase in Dutch for something along the lines of, "The fat woman is a bitch," which they could employ easily without anyone knowing what they were talking about. At least until they went to Amsterdam and the tour guide at the Anne Frank house/museum got a bit surly, and he momentarily forgot which country he was in. TL. Doctor, my uncle called a tour guide at the Anne Frank house a fat bitch in her first language. Every day at work. I work in a manufacturing facility with many Hispanic immigrants who like to gossip constantly. They assume that, due to the fact that I'm white, I have no understanding of Spanish. But what they don't know is that I went to a school system which required us to take 4 years of a language, where I reluctantly learned Spanish. For 3 years now I've been working there, listening to their gossip about me. I haven't said anything because I like being able to hear what they really think, and find it kind of amusing. At times it has been quite difficult to pretend like I can't understand, but I've managed to pull it off. I'm really looking forward to my last day, when I bust out my Spanish and teach them a lesson about being judgmental and shallow. I can speak Polish. By speaking Polish, you can, in varying degrees, understand Ukrainian, Czech, Slovakian, and to a small degree, Russian. I've heard a few things directed to me once or twice. On one particular occasion, 2 Ukrainian girls were talking about me on the subway, but not letting them know I understood. When I had to get off the train, I simply smiled at them and said I understood everything you two were talking about, and left. Their faces dropped. Not me, but heard from my dad, a stamp collector and an associate curator at the Carnegie Museum. They sold off the collection long ago. A group of Polish falcons wanted to see the museum's Polish collection and started trash talking, Polish of course, about how badly their country's stamps were presented. The Carnegie Museum had at that time absorbed the entire Smithsonian stamp collection. The curator, Hungarian, spoke English, French, Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, and a few other Eastern European languages. After a minute or two, he walked over to the group and kindly asked them to leave, in perfect formal Polish. The curator's parting shot was, the last cultured Pole was Copernicus. My mom speaks an obscure dialect of Chinese, although not very well, since she learned English upon going to school. But she can still usually understand anyone else speaking the Cantonese dialect. One day we went to a market in Chinatown and my mom was trying to order something, but the people had a hard time understanding her because obscure dialect. At that point, the old ladies behind us started talking smack about us in Cantonese. My mom said what she got out of it was, that lady is very Americanized, her Chinese is terrible, and her daughter, me, is clearly half white, and because of that she is ugly. We gave them the stink eye. Live in South Korea and have pretty decent Korean skills. Found an English-speaking dentist advertised on an expat website because it's the kind of complicated situation where you would rather have treatment options explained in English. I didn't let on that I understood Korean though. They had just put in the gooey mixture mold to get an impression for making a crown, and I heard the dental assistant ask, is she Indian? But don't they have a caste system in India? How can they live like that? The widespread opinion amongst Koreans is that Southeast Asians are beneath them, so I also picked up on the disgust in her voice. The dentist proceeded to inform her that I was from India and it's a terrible way to live, and there are so many people living there. To which I respond by spitting out the mold and taking off with the dentist about how unprofessional it was to speak about clients while they are in the chair having treatment. He tried to apologize and make excuses, and told me to understand his situation. Common Korean response when they do something wrong, to which I replied, please understand my situation. I'm a South African, 4th gen Indian descent, living in Korea for 5 years, and for 5 years everywhere I go people stare about me, insist that I must be Indian and can't possibly be African, and talk about me like I'm invisible. I told him that he should not advertise to the expat community because he doesn't deserve their business. At this point, pent-up anger at this kind of repeated incident came rushing through, and for a usually passive-aggressive personality I got mean. I told the dentist that, while his dentist assistant thinks she can judge me in my presence and thinks she knows who I am, I speak better Korean than his assistant can speak English, and probably earn more than her. This is a low blow aimed at how Koreans value monetary status, and feel that it gives social standing, and that would shock them, since they thought I was someone from India they believe could not have these things. I then asked him why he hired people like her. This was followed by more groveling, and I'm sorries and deep bows. Finished treatment, had no choice. and left by saying I would inform all the expats I knew about that incident. Oh, yes. All the time. My other language I speak is Hungarian, which is really obscure and not related to any other language beyond vague grammatical ties to Finnish and Estonian, and there are less than 15 million native speakers, of which just under 10 million live in Hungary proper. So Hungarian speakers will often just assume it's a secret language when outside Hungary that no one else will understand, because 99% of the time it's true. That said, there are enough Hungarians in some places, like San Francisco, that it's best to not assume this, and I overheard people quite a lot the summer I worked there. I remember for example hearing a couple arguing on a Saturday night in the grocery store, in the tone that normally you'd be having that argument at home, but they assumed no one else understood them. I've overheard hugely emotional goodbyes and confessions in train stations and airports, that likewise should have been at home. You really just sorta cringe and turn the music up loudly on your MP3 player, because telling them to stop would just be more awkward for everyone involved. My mom and dad had the best story like this though, when they were in Austria for their first Christmas as a married couple. Apparently at the table next to them at Christmas Eve dinner in a restaurant there was a man by himself who had a German Shepherd, and he was letting the dog literally eat the food off his plate and all sorts of things like that. So my mom spent the entire dinner complaining about this guy letting his dog do all these things in a restaurant etc in Hungarian, but at the end of the meal as he got up the man came over to their table and said Kalams Karaksonai Nepakut Kivanok, and left. In Hungarian that's the polite way of wishing someone a happy Christmas holiday. Props to that guy, and props to my mom for telling this story to us as kids, to not rely on our secret language too much in public. Oh, I have a good one. I'm a gringo, but I speak fluent Spanish. At an after-hours nightclub in Miami, I took a break from dancing to go to the ladies' room. While I'm washing my hands, two Venezuelan girls come in. They look me over, and the first says in Spanish, not so kindly, check out this white girl. She hasn't stopped dancing all morning. Her friend shrugs, and says for a white girl, she can move. I turn around with a big grin, and say to the first one in Spanish, I can teach you my moves if you want. All three of us bust out laughing. They bought me a couple rounds and we danced together for a few hours. Fun times. I'm a high school English teacher with mostly Hispanic students, and you'd never know it by looking at me, but I also speak Spanish. I never advertise this to my classes until something like this comes up. I've caught students talking trash about other teachers, about me, trying to cheat on tests and papers, all kinds of stuff. One time that stands out was when a student warned another one not to try cheating, and she responded with "Sun gurito, no sabe nada, he's a little white boy, he doesn't know anything." I looked at her and responded "Sabes gurito en shin todo lo que dices, you know, this white boy understands everything you say." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by some kid in the back going "oh shit," and then the whole class erupted.